Today we're going to cover the concept of Young's modulus. Now, fracking is not just about breaking rock. Most of the energy during a frac job is absorbed by pushing rocks, the walls of a fracture, typically vertically, to push these walls of the fracture out of the way. It takes most of the energy during a frac job. In a simple model, fracture width is proportional to the net pressure, the pressure that's pushing on the walls of the fracture to open them, and inversely proportional to the stiffness of the rock. Now, the most common measure of the stiffness of this material is what we call the Young's modulus.
The Young's modulus can be measured in a simple uniaxial compression test. A load F is applied to an area A along a cylindrical core sample. Units of force is in pounds and unit of area is in square inches, combining it into pounds per square inches, or psi. The sample will shorten due to the load. The strain represents the relative shortening of the sample's length. It is a dimensionless unit. The Young's modulus represents the stress per unit strain, which is the ratio of these two parameters.
Now, in this experimental setup in my garage, I will be measuring the Young's modulus of Jello, or a more generic version of gelatin. And the nice thing about Jello and gelatin is that it has a very exaggerated behavior when it comes to deformation. So we apply a relatively small load and the Jello changes in shape a lot. That's what we're interested in. Now, rock does the same thing, but it doesn't quite move to the same amount. But it still moves under load. So in this setup, I'm using actually double strength Jello to make it a little bit stronger than what you're used to when you make it in your kitchen and eat it later. And I've actually used a Liberty beer stein because of its nice cylindrical shape, and you can actually get the sample out when you use that material. I also installed a bit of a guiding system because if I apply load with this can that I will fill with steel shot, 1 pound at a time in each of these cups, you want to make sure that the cup is right above the sample. So I'll start loading it up. And before that, we typically would measure the length of the sample. I've done it already before. But with a caliper, as you can see right here, you can actually measure the length of the sample. And then you can actually measure how much the sample has changed when you measure it when it's under a larger load. So we'll load the sample up. First pound of steel shot. So you can clearly see that the sample has shrunken a little bit. And if we keep on doing that, if I keep on adding another pound of steel shot, you will see that the sample is becoming shorter and shorter.
In both experiments, we start with an unloaded sample and measure its original length. Then we add the load on top with 1 pound increments up to 5 or 6 pounds. From images, we can further determine the sample length change for every step. In Jello, we apply a load of 6 pounds, and remembering that the diameter of the sample is 2.5 inches, that makes a 5 square inch area for the sample. 6 pounds divided by 5 square inches equals 1.2 psi. Under that load of 1.2 psi, the sample shortened by 31%. For generic gelatin, 5 pounds of load, or equivalent to 1 psi of stress, shortened the sample by 29%. I loaded the sample all the way up to 16 pounds, and you can see it becomes stiffer with the higher loads. I was also trying to break the sample under uniaxial compression, and even a frac hammer didn't quite do the job. We can now use the equations we discussed before to determine the Young's modulus of Jello. The equations on the left represent a simple calculation of the modulus for Jello based on the beginning and ending measurements. We can also create a stress-strain diagram on the right with all measurements and draw in a best fit line through the data beyond the initial loading of the sample. The slope of the line through the data represents the Young's modulus. The modulus of double-strength jello is about 5.3 psi and 4.3 psi for the double-strength generic gelatin. That is about 1 million times lower than the modulus of shale. While I have ignored many rock mechanical phenomena, the principle of deformation is about the same.
In conclusion, the Young's modulus is an important parameter in hydraulic fracturing and fracture modeling. The Young's modulus directly impacts fracture width and fracture connectivity, and through conservation of mass, it also impacts the length and the height of the fracture when we assess with models how fractures are growing in a specific situation. For more information about fracture modeling and about Young's modulus, visit us at libertyfrac.com. This is Lane at Liberty. Thank you for watching.